Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us today for our webinar called Prosper with Pricing. The goal for today's webinar is explicitly to discuss a couple of things that you're all familiar with in your practices, things around price lists, patient rebates, and general practice independence. If you guys have been following along with our blog over the last few weeks, we've been talking about all of these things. At the conclusion of this webinar, we will send a recap of what we talked about, some follow-up steps if you're interested in learning more, as well as links to those webinars. But as we get rolling, I would also ask, again, anybody who has questions, anyone who wants to discuss anything that's on the topic here or other anagram-related questions, we will be happy to answer those. So let's get rolling. Also, I should ask, there is some music playing in the background. If it's too loud or if you can't hear me, please let me know. I will adjust as needed, and then we can go from there. First, we'll start with an introduction of me. My name is Steve Alexander. I'm the Director of Marketing and Partnerships at Anagram. Don't know why I found myself reading the title off of the slide, but that is what happened. A little bit of background on me. I've been in the industry since I was 16. I started as an optician at a franchised Pearl Vision location. I had been working at a movie theater, and my mom called me one day and asked if I wanted to go work for an eye doctor, and I said sure. And here I am, I think 19 years later, and have loved every minute I've gotten to spend in this industry. I've learned a ton. I feel like I've been able to help a lot of people, not just as an optician, but in my role here at Anagram. After starting as an optician, I became a manager, then a regional manager. The last 8 years or so I've spent as a consultant and speaker, as well as helping practices find their perfect exit strategy on the private equity side, if that was right for them, or recruiting someone to help take over the mantle of that practice. And then I've been with Anagram for a little bit over a year now, and we've been working to develop our messaging, make sure we got it out in front of as many practices as we could to talk about the great work that Anagram does and is continuing to do. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining, and hopefully that little background helps color why the conversation we're about to have is what it is. So as a first step, I want to discuss all of the elephants in the room. Now, when I say that, I think everyone on this call and most people in the industry know who and what I'm talking about. Now, we do have a number of different challenges that are going on, and there's a poll that popped up, so if you guys wouldn't mind answering those. There's a number of elephants in the room, all of which have a certain impact on private practice optometry. And you're familiar with managed care, certainly vertical integration and consolidation and private equity. And I'm gonna stop at those three in particular because there's a lot of interrelation there. So when we talk about managed care, we're talking about the vision plans in the space, the VSPs, the iMeds, the Davis Visions of the world. And then vertical integration and consolidation all play a significant part in the work that they do. So managed care is not just a third-party plan that drives patients through your doors. They are also vertically integrated. So most of these vision plans also own labs and lens companies and frame companies in some cases. And that creates a kind of incentive structure that benefits them more so than it does the practices that participate with those plans, and certainly more so than it does the patients, despite how they kind of set out or what they set out to do initially. When I started as an optician, this was before Luxottica had even purchased Cole, so Pearl Vision was not a Luxottica property at the time, and we were very aware of Vision Service Plan as something that came out to help sort of level the playing field between private practice ODs and the big box retailers. And anyone who's kind of been paying attention to where the industry has gone over the last decade and change, that has become a little bit more complex an issue. VSP is more than just a managed care provider. Over the last couple of years, they've acquired some big retail operations in VisionWorks. They also have a private equity arm in VSP Ventures where they are actively purchasing local practices, and bringing all of this up in this conversation because there are so many things that seem like a benefit to the practice initially, or seem like a necessary part of doing business. In my capacity as a consultant, I've heard a lot of practices and practice managers and doctors and opticians refer to vision plans as a necessary evil of doing business. Now, I don't know if I'd characterize it that way, but something that Anagram has done a good deal of work to do is to at least get rid of the necessary part. So something to consider. So we're in the industry now, we're facing a lot of these elephants, but two that the vision plans, the big box retailers don't really have an impact on are changing demographics and consumer behavior. And I think practices' ability to understand those things, a business's ability to understand those two things in particular, have a huge bearing on whether or not they're going to be successful, and certainly in helping them find their own audience. I think a lot of practices rely on vision plans to drive new patients, and I think that's okay. We may want to recontextualize vision plans as certainly not insurance, because they are not insurance. They don't really allay risk in any actual way, but what they do is drive patients into the practices that accept those patients on an in-network basis. So we're going to talk about how to consider all of this when making decisions about your practice, and what you can do to better improve your margins. So we'll move on to this slide. So I think it's really important that we start asking questions about how the industry operates and how our practices and businesses operate in the industry. So just a simple question to kind of a little bit of food for thought for the audience here. What do you call a business where most of the owner's choices are made for them? And I think it's important that we kind of lay that foundation. So in other places, like let's say, fast food, if McDonald's tells you where to get your food, what to charge for your food, what you can expect to profit, they dictate your hiring practices and so forth, you would call that a franchise. And that is, to me, pretty similar to what a lot of those vision plans do when you accept them on an in-network basis. Now, on their own, right, that's not disqualifying on its own, because in the event that they're helping you become profitable, or they're helping you see more patients or do more good work in the space, that's fine. Unfortunately, what has happened because of the vertical integration, because of the private equity position in our space, the vision plans that were initially set to help private practices be successful are more interested in, at least the way they structure their deals, they're more interested in having themselves be successful. There are approximately 120 million Americans with some kind of vision plan today. And we see that roughly 30% of them use those benefits every year. In a lot of ways, vision benefits are kind of like a gym membership for your eyes. Vision plans do best when they're not used, but even when the plans are used, the vision plans have created a system whereby they're profitable no matter what, while patients end up paying a little bit more, and practices certainly end up profiting less. You're typically giving away between 35 and 55% of your revenue in exchange for seeing those patients. So all of this preamble is to set us up to ask the question, what does truly independent eye care look like? What does it feel like, and what does it mean for you as a practitioner, as an independent eye care professional? And we want to make sure that we're having that conversation throughout. So any questions or any thoughts about what independence means to you, or what it looks like for you, would be appreciated. We can have that conversation. But if I were to define it, I would define independent eye care as a practice or a business being able to determine their own standard of care. And whether we're talking about an optometrist's office or an optician's office or an ophthalmologist's office, standard of care is something that each of those O's can decide for themselves. So as an optician, I'm a firm believer that a pair of glasses without the anti-reflective coating is an incomplete pair of glasses. I know opticians who agree with that. I know opticians who don't necessarily, but that's the standard of care that I want to set. The issue with having vision plans is in your office is that they have decided what their standard of care is, and in order to continue to participate with them, you have to follow their standard of care and not yours. And it is those small elements of shaving away your independence one step at a time that kind of led us to where we, as an organization or as an industry, kind of where we are today. So let's think about that as we go forward into this conversation about all of the organizations, all of the potential partnerships, all of the forces that exist in our industry that shave away our independence one step at a time. Make it so that we don't really have the capacity to make the kind of choices that perhaps we wish we did. And then we'll think about how to address that and how to improve on that as we go forward. I'm going to pause here to see if there are any questions. I'm going to grab a sip of coffee and we can move forward to the next slide after. Okay, moving on. So we want to talk about reclaiming control. Earlier, we were discussing about all of the elephants in the room that take away that control, all of the mechanisms where your independence could potentially be taken away a little bit at a time until it's all gone. So we want to ask another series of questions. What can we do today to grow our practice and make ourselves PE proof, private equity proof, or make it so that the competition in your immediate area isn't as big an obstacle for you? And there are lots of ways we can answer that question, but I think as long as we're asking that question, we have a direction in which to go. Now, in my capacity as a consultant, I've worked with a lot of practices who don't do a ton of marketing or don't have a significant marketing budget. And in that circumstance, vision plans act as a really good mechanism to get new patients in. And then once they're through your doors, you can potentially convert them to medical plan patients or into your optical, or convert them to higher quality products, whatever the case is. But many practices, because they've gone the route of generalist and have gone in network with all these vision plans, they end up seeing 6 patients an hour, and at that kind of volume, in order to be profitable, they don't have a chance to step back and work on their practice because they're so busy working in their practice. And I think it's incumbent on us to reclaim control over the business in those specific ways. I know the pandemic has raised a lot of questions around, what the right modality of operating your practice might be, where there were those internal capacities or interior capacities that were set by governments across the country, where you couldn't necessarily see 6 patients in an hour because you had to sterilize in between or what have you. And I spoke with a number of practices over that time who recognized that when they were seeing fewer patients, while they weren't, their top line wasn't as strong because they weren't running through as many patients, their bottom line was pretty close to as strong despite seeing half as many patients. They recognized that they were able to focus on those individual patients a little bit more closely than they had in the past. And that allowed them to talk to them about products and services that they otherwise didn't have time to initiate. Even multiple pair sales, something that went up over that time period. Now, that's not true across the board, but it's something I heard often enough, where we do want to discuss what does retaking control of your practice look like and how you start to do that. Now, those of you on this call are familiar with Anagram and what we do for practices who are out of network with a vision plan or several vision plans. But then, there's a couple of different ways a practice ends up out of network. And I think clarifying how that happens is important here. So practice can be out of network with a vision plan because they are in a saturated market. This happens often with IMED, for example. If you're in a place where IMED has a ton of doctors that are in network, they won't let you in panel. And in that case, Anagram allows a practice to at least see those patients anyway. With VSP, if you're an optician-owned practice, you will never be allowed in panel unless somehow VSP buys you, which does change the equation a little bit. But those limitations, those guardrails that they put in are something that it's not business friendly, it is vision plan friendly. So Anagram is already working to help practices be vision plan agnostic and see as many patients as possible, or as many patients as makes sense for the model. We want to continue as an organization to drive private pay business up, to make vision plans less necessary for your business so that you can run your practices your way, see your patients the way that you'd like to see them. This was, I already started to allude to this, but we believe in taking steps forward by stepping away. So Anagram's platform for the last 5 years, you may have known it as Patch, we have been doing the out-of-network eligibility verification and claim filing for thousands of practices across the country. We are now calling this program Anagram Access, and you'll learn why a little bit later on in this presentation. But what's really important here is we believe that Anagram Access helps put you and your patients at the wheel where you guys belong, where the healthcare decisions you're making are yours and not the vision plans. Now, let's talk about, outside of the vision plans, what other decisions do you have to make as an organization that have significant impact on your profit potential? And maybe I'll pause here to discuss profit potential for a moment, because I think a lot of eye care practitioners, a lot of doctors, a lot of opticians are in it to help patients and don't love a revenue-driven conversation. So I want to kind of set the stage that when we discuss revenue, it is not for the sake of revenue. I'm a firm believer in doing right by your customer, by your patient, and the revenue will come. But if you ignore revenue altogether, if you don't consider the impact that decisions you make might have on your revenue, you may not have a long-term business. And that's why a lot of the focus of this conversation is around revenue. We want to increase your bottom line, increase the revenue you take home. Top line revenue is something that vision plans do help with, that a lot of these partners do help with. But if everything that you're selling makes it seem like you're making a ton more revenue, but in the end, you're just spinning your wheels for the same profit, then it ends up leading to burnout or frustration or this sort of feeling of inevitability. And we'd like to avoid that. So we want to talk about the outside forces that exist, but we also want to talk about reclaiming your business by aligning your business with those organizations that match with you philosophically. Now, everyone on this call and most everyone Anagram deals with is an independent eye care practitioner, many of whom use products from the big companies that we've been talking about. And that's not to say that the products aren't good or they shouldn't be used on their own merits. Luxottica makes an excellent series of frames. Essilor makes fantastic lenses. Marchand does a good job. That's something that's really clear. And I don't mean to besmirch any of the work that they actually do. But the practical result of working with those organizations is that they will often put restrictions on you in order to maintain those relationships. And a lot of practices, because they can't devote the time to do the math to figure out whether or not this is a long-term advantage for them, it ends up kind of biting them in the butt. A case in point is Ray-Ban, for instance. Now, Ray-Ban is a frame company that does a really great job of marketing itself. It's something that has been one of the top selling frame collections in the industry for the entire time I've been an optician and even before then. And it's a question that comes up a lot in my consulting, whether practices should carry it or not. And something I often say is it may be worthwhile as a marketing tool, because patients will often call your practice and say, do you carry Ray-Ban or do you carry Oakley? And, it's nice to be able to answer that question with yes. There are other things to think about, though. When you're carrying Ray-Ban in your office, there are a lot of requirements on you. I think last I checked, you had to buy 40 frames to open that account and buy another 40 within the first year to keep that account open. Now, are you going to sell 80 Ray-Ban frames in a year? If with enough volume, probably, but not every practice does that, and not every practice should do that. What I would suggest is figure out what it is you want to offer your patients. If you want to be kind of all things to all people, great. We can do a general frame board and keep those products in-house and work in that regard, and that's fine. If you want to carve out a specialty where you're doing something different that the local retailers can't do or won't do, then that's how you set yourself apart. And it's really important that we understand that a patient comes to you because you're you, because of the exam that you provide, because of the staff in your office, and because of the treatment that they receive. More and more patients and customers generally are interested in kind of a bespoke experience. I know for me, I am really deliberate about who I choose to give my business to. I try not to go to Amazon. I try certainly not to go to Walmart. I'd rather keep my business local. And there is market research to suggest that point of view, that perspective, is becoming more and more prevalent. More people want to support local business. More people understand that the local economy matters and want to keep it there. So question to ask is, how are your partners that you currently work with, how do they help you get out in the community? How do they help you set yourself apart? If you look at a series of practice websites or social media posts, a lot of them read pretty interchangeably. We have the highest quality product, we have the best technology, we have a great doctor. And as a patient looking into that, how do you make your decision about where to go? How do you decide, this practice is for me? And a lot of it has to do with your online reputation. A lot of it has to do with the products and services that you offer. But if you're able to create a differentiator, if you're able to give your patients a concrete reason to pick your practice as opposed to what they could find in the mall, you'll end up winning the day much more often than not. And how do you find partners that philosophically align with you? Look for that. Look for the who they work with. Look for what they're trying to do as an organization. Look for what they say they stand for and follow up on it. It's easy to say that I'm for the independent ECP, but if I'm actively buying them out, or if I'm actively competing with them, is that really true? Some food for thought there. Perfect timing. So what is Anagram's focus? What do we want to accomplish? We have 3 core values that we talk about in every one of our meetings. We want to fight for price transparency. We want to support private pay practices, and we want to move vision care forward. Now, for us, price transparency means cutting through the vision plan confusion. It means helping practices see more private pay patients, because when you're working with a private pay patients, you get to decide what your fees are. You get to decide your level of care. You get to decide which labs and which partners you use. You get so much more freedom from a private pay patient than you do from an in-network patient. And I realize that's been something that we talked about a lot over this particular webinar, but it's important that understanding where limitations on your ability to practice come from will help us make intelligent decisions for the future of our practice, for the future of your practice, for the future of our business. We want to make private practice eye care not just continue to exist, we want it to thrive. We would like it to be the right way forward, and we want to figure out what the proper combination of things are to make it feasible. When I initially joined Anagram, I was brought on for a particular project, And sorry about that. What happened there? I was here for a particular project, and we've developed something new that I think answers a lot of these questions. So I'd like to introduce everybody to Anagram Prosper. It is a new kind of program. Now we are working with philosophically aligned organizations that want to work with private practice ODs and opticians to create something different. So as of now, our network is over 2,000 practices strong, and we've taken this network and we've taken it to our partners and tried to create something new. So a question to ask, and I think we have a poll ready for that, is, there it is. Do you think instant rebates would influence patient buying decisions? And while you're mulling that over, I can tell you that we've been running a market test across the country at about 40 practices. And at those 40 practices, we've offered patient rebates for purchasing products, particular independent products. And over the course of the 4-month market test, we've been able to see a couple of things. So with a relatively small rebate to the patient, something that we have been able to negotiate with our partners, we've been able to influence a couple of major factors that I think everyone in this call is probably tracking to some degree. Capture rate is the first one, and multiple pair sales is the second. So across the industry, if you look at some of the publications, you look at the MBA statistics, they will tell you that capture rate is somewhere between 60 and 65% across the industry. Now that is something, because it's self-reported, I'd suggest we take that data with a bit of a grain of salt. But if you guys are familiar with GPN's The Edge, their data aggregator system is in 7,000 practices across the country. And among those, the average practice capture rate is about 50%. And the top 10% of practices on their platform averages a 60% capture rate. That's, those are the best performing practices. What we've seen over the course of the market test among practices is that their capture rate routinely goes up by about 10%. So if they were at 50%, they see an eyewear capture rate go to 60%. And the way they do it is by presenting these rebates to the patient. The patient will receive, after they buy, let's say for the sake of conversation, it's Hoya lenses and Dorigo Rem frames or Europa frames. If a patient buys a set of Dorigo frames and a pair of Hoya lenses, they'll get, let's say, a $40 rebate at the conclusion of it. The reason this works to motivate the patient is they get a gift on the other end of it for buying a pair of glasses that they like anyway. Now, I want to be clear in that it's not going to define, whether or not a patient is going to buy glasses from you. Typically, your staff has to be well equipped, your exam has to be good. All of that stuff has to be taken as kind of for granted. We have to have that as a baseline. But if they're looking in your optical and if they're likely going to purchase eyewear anyway, this program does create an incentive for them to buy particular products rather. So if you do carry Ray-Ban, for example, and you also carry Europa, if a patient is making a one-to-one comparison and they're choosing between those two frames, they're more than likely to select the one that gives them the rebate as opposed to the one that doesn't. The same thing is true on the lens side as well. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware of how this works. So our platform, super simple. When you log in, now all of you have access to our program Anagram Access now, and we've worked really hard to make it as simple as possible to use. I've heard routinely that new employees can use Anagram before they can schedule a patient's appointment, which is always really encouraging. Our Prosper platform is even simpler than it's significantly simpler even than the out-of-network claim submission, because all we need to be able to do that is the patient's name and their email address and the products that they purchased. Once we have that information, the practice will click submit, and the patient gets a rebate in their email, a digital Visa gift card in their email before they leave the office. So this does a couple of things. One, it's a gift to the patient for doing what they were going to do anyway. Two, it is significantly different than offering your patients a discount for a couple of reasons. One, first and foremost, it doesn't come out of your pocket. So if you have a standard cash pay discount of 20%, like most practices I've spoken with do, and not everyone does, and some people have a bigger cash pay discount than that, but let's say you give a cash pay discount of about 20%. You can stop doing that, and we've had practices that have stopped doing that and have used these rebates in exchange for that, which means your top line revenue is now 20% higher on a pair of glasses than it was before. Then when we get the rebate, so let's say the patient was going to buy a $500 pair of glasses, and if you were to give them a 10% discount, they would actually pay $450 for that pair of glasses, and that would be the last interaction they have with your practice until they came to pick them up. But the last sort of financial transaction they have is having paid you $450. Now let's talk about how it works with Prosper. In Prosper, they will have paid you $500. So your practice will have received $500 in revenue, and then the patient receives a $50 Visa gift card in their email from your practice. So the last interaction they have financially with your business is receiving a gift. Now that Visa gift card can be used anywhere. They can be used for lunch. They can be used even to purchase multiple pairs or an additional pair of glasses, or however the individual patient wants to use it. Anywhere that a Visa card is accepted, they can use that card. Got a question from the audience. Are those rebates on eyeglasses only? At the moment, yes. At the moment, they are on eyeglasses only. I have every intention of getting this on contact lens rebates, for contact lenses. The difficulty is on contacts is they already have a rebate program. And the reason, this is a really great point to bring up, so thank you, Joyce. The reason those rebates exist is contact lens companies and opticians and offices know that a rebate is a great incentive to have the patient buy more than they perhaps otherwise would. So in the case of contact lenses, most of the rebates gear towards annual supplies. And let's say, and the biggest benefit are for the highest ticket items. So if a patient gets an annual supply of silicone and hydrogel daily contact lenses, they can get a rebate of $100 or sometimes $150 with the right, promotion combination. But those rebates necessitate that the patient buys everything all at once, has the eye exam within a prescripted time period. A bunch of restrictions are listed on those rebate forms. Then the patient has to fill out the form, submit a receipt, and often submit box tops or serial bar codes from the contact lenses, and then send it out through the mail to hope that they get to the right place, that they filled everything out correctly, and that they get a rebate back in the mail in some undetermined amount of time. From a practice perspective, we know that having those annual supply rebate conversation works. I know when I was a practicing optician selling those, I would routinely sell them using those rebates as a method to get a patient over the line. But when they came in the following year, the conversation was a little bit more difficult, because they will say something like, I sent those in, but I don't think I ever got the gift card, or I never got the rebate, or I didn't send it in even, because it's a lot of work. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. Rebates, mail-in rebates across all industries, sort of irrespective of how much money they're offered, irrespective of what type of customer we're talking about, redemption for those rebates sits below 10%. So the experience of receiving a mail-in rebate is not ideal. Going back to Joyce's question about the contact lens rebates, it's something we want to be a part of this program, and I'm actively negotiating that to be part of this program. But with contact lens companies, those rebates are a big maybe. They offer the potential for a $100 rebate, but they only ever give it to 10 out of 100 people. So the assumption of a discount assumption of a rebate isn't something they make. They know that they're really not going to give those rebates out very often. So this is a different ask for them. I think, we will get contact lens rebates. It's a matter of time, but it's just not there yet. So, but it's really important that we can, for me, it's really important that we contrast this against those mail-in rebates. In this case, the patient doesn't have to do anything, and the practice just puts their information into our platform, and the patient gets an instant rebate for doing that. Now, Anagram Prosper is something that we're offering to access customers only. Because you guys have been our customers for whatever period of time you have been, we're grateful to you as our community in the space. We are super proud of the organization that we have and of the practices that work with us. There are also tendencies among Anagram customers that I think are really enviable. Our customers tend to be more progressive minded as far as business goes. They tend to want to do something about what's going on in the industry. So we're offering this to you, the opportunity to give your patients rebates for selling products you're probably already selling at no charge to you. We don't want to charge you to join Prosper. There is a catch to joining Prosper, and it is using the price list that we've negotiated on your lenses, on some of your lenses and some of your frames. That is something we want to have. That is a conversation we want to have on kind of an individual basis, because not every arrangement makes sense for every practice. But if you're currently using, let's say, a lot of Essilor lenses for your in-network vision patients, that's great. We don't want to change that necessarily, but for your private pay patients who might come in to see you because your website says they can get a rebate for coming to your practice, maybe we want to talk about a Hoya lens or a Shamir lens or Nikon or private label, and maybe you do a lot of work with Luxottica frames or Safilo frames, but for your private pay patients, maybe you want to increase the margins and take more home by using Dorigo Rem or Europa or those smaller organizations that are really interested in partnering with you, because they face the same issues that you do. Labs that aren't owned by vision plans and frame companies that aren't owned by vision plans are similarly behind the eight ball. If we can create a kind of rebel alliance that leads to more freedom and better choices for us as businesses, it'll lead to more freedom and better choices for our patients. Ultimately, our goal is to help you thrive as a business, and that this is how we're doing it. We've seen, as mentioned, quite a bit of success with our market test. We are gradually bringing it out one small step at a time. I don't know if you guys have seen, we've got a new website up that does talk about Prosper in a little bit more detail. So feel free to visit anagram.care. You can navigate to Prosper, or you can go to anagram.care/Prosper, and it'll give you additional information. If you want to follow, if you want to set up a time to discuss Prosper, Connor did put a message in the chat that'll link you directly to a calendar, so you can set up a demo. Any questions about that? Okay. One last note. As mentioned, we had done a market test over the last 4 months. We've got a number of endorsements, but this one is probably my favorite. Dr. Shaw out of Florida has a fantastically busy practice and has been using Anagram Access for a while, and has actually partnered with us to drop his very last vision plan. So he is now fully out of network with every vision plan, and had this to say. I'm going to read it fully for everyone who may not be looking. I think it's really important. Just his words are super key here. With Anagram's new rebate program, our patients are happier, getting better products for less cost, while our profit margins remain healthy. It's really a no-brainer. Now, I'm a believer that you should probably think about every decision before you make it, but this is as close to a no-brainer as I've seen. This is to help practices that are already working with patients increase their profitability, increase their patients' delight, and reduce our reliance on the elephants in the room that we talked about. I think that's it for the presentation. I want to open the floor to any questions anyone might have. I'll stop sharing my screen here. Yeah, if there are any questions that you guys have, please feel free to ask them. I'm here, or whether it's Anagram related, Prosper related, Anagram access related, I'm here to answer those. If there are no other questions, I can have the Anagram team follow up with you later on individually. Okay, well, it seems like there aren't any questions. Thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate your attendance and your attention. If there's anything I can do for you, please feel free to email me directly. My email address is steve@anagram.care. Here to help in any way that I can. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I'll wrap up the webinar. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.